Kiss My Chaos. Taking stories of trauma into triumph while living life in the middle and everything in between. All views are expressed solely of the host, guests, and for entertainment purposes only. You don't like it? Well, you can kiss our chaos. Here are your hosts, Abigail Dark and D.T. Hudson.
Welcome back to Kiss My Chaos. I'm Dan. I'm here with the one, the only Halloween Scream Queen, Miss Abigail Dark. This week's guest, Miss Tory Queensley. Let's get into her story.
Awesome name.
I made it myself, actually.
You know what? I'm going to have to call my friend CJ up in Belcourt. He's got to give me a new name because it's like we got Tory, we got Abigail Dark, and Dan.
Well, why don't we ask the listeners to give you a new name?
I think that's a great idea.
Oh, you know, it's like the never-ending story. Dan needs a name.
Dan needs a name. Be gentle. Be gentle.
You do. I'm friends with Casey Hagan, and she told me that you had picked your last name.
I did, yep. I was born with my, obviously, original name. And then when I had gotten married and then divorced, they told me that that was the one and only time that you can essentially pick your name without having to pay for it. And so it was actually a very pivotal thing for me. I was like, this is a whole, like, new identity, you know? Like, I don't have a name attached to my family at all other than my dad. And he's not in the picture. And so it was like, well, I'm not going to keep my married last name. So I literally created it.
Why Queensley?
Because Queen. But also, I really dig, like, the English, like, Kingsley type of thing. But I was like, that's a weird identity to try to identify with. Right. I'm not English, or British, I should say. And so I just kind of came up with Queensley. I had a few of them, and I kind of snowballed them with the guy I was dating at the time, and he's like, not those. So he's like, probably Queensley.
Like Johnson.
Yeah, that was actually my maiden name.
Oh.
Yeah. So you can about imagine.
Not Johnson.
Not Johnson,
right
yeah.
We look at where we're at right
yeah.
now, and it's like, well, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
When I was going to the police academy, one of my roommate actually was native. He's from Belcourt. He's like, you guys have the whitest names here, like Annabelle Lisbon. I'm like, I know,
yeah.
Man, I know. But he was a Turcotte, so that's pretty common up in that area too.
Yeah.
Well, my fiance, it's so funny, he's native as well. And his family comes from Buffalo Boy. That's their last name, heritage. But he's a Hurley. Okay, well.
It's interesting you say changing the last name because my friend went from Turcotte but he goes by Graham now. So I never asked.
Whatever identity you need, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you can get it, yeah. It's totally fine.
Yeah, and then the marriage thing, he's like, well, are you gonna take my last name? And I'm like, it's so special to me. I was like, I'll hyphenate.
I was gonna say, could you hyphenate?
I'll hyphenate.
Just like,
yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a hyphenate.
I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Because then, you know, you never want to say, yeah, well, you just drop it off. You know?
So I met you, not technically met you, just a tiny bit. I got to see you at the Jeremiah program. I managed Riddle's Jewelry in Fargo, and we were, one of the donators for that. I went, the first year I ever went to that, I was just in awe. I couldn't even, I was like, man, look at these, really strong women. This is a great program. And I think that's what drew me to you. There were speakers in the past, but for some reason, I'm like, I like this girl because you were sassy and just spunky. And I love that about someone, that you were just like, I'm going to tell it as it is with emotion. And I could tell up there you were, in your head trying really hard to be like, okay, I got to keep my composure. I got to keep going through this. But also reliving it in the moment. So anybody that has not seen her YouTube speech, I would highly recommend going and watching it. But I think for us, let's kind of start maybe from the beginning, and we'll kind of let you tell your story, and we'll have some questions as we go in between there. But where does it all start for you?
So, facets of my life, are really, I have this version, these roles, right, that I play. I shouldn't say play, that I have, and everybody has them, right? Like when you describe yourself, who are you, right? And so I could say that I'm a mom, I'm a college graduate, I'm a nurse, I'm in recovery, I'm a recovering addict, I'm a woman, etc. And so it's just, for the Jeremiah program, when I did that keynote, I really tried to envelop the story around the success of, the kind of the flow of my life and then into Jeremiah program, right? But as far as like where it starts for me, it really just, I guess it just depends on, what perspective you're asking me about. But I guess if we're starting with the basics, I grew up in a single parent household with my older brother, Joe, and we're about 5 years apart exactly. And so it was tough as a child, not necessarily feeling like there was a lot of support, right? He was my older brother. We were, so many years apart. And, I had this single mother who, product of in her environment. She grew up. I want to give that its justice. She grew up pretty gruesome, and so like we all say, our parents do the best they can, right? But we definitely grew up in low income, and we grew up. God, how do you describe it, right? Like. I guess from my perspective, I could say that I don't feel like I had a lot of opportunity as a child. I didn't get to really do a lot of things. We didn't do family vacations. We didn't do really a lot of family dinners. We didn't, you didn't catch us at the table saying, "How's your day?" It's, get the children fed and get to work, right, for my mother. And so, a lot of difficulty too. I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I think that was a pretty common thing when I was a child. They were just kind of figuring out what that was, and it was like a project to be managed, right? Mm-hmm. And I was just that annoying little kid. I was like up in everybody's face and just always yapping off and all the things, right? And the only other extended family that we truly have is my grandma and my uncle, who are actually both passed now. So it did not feel it didn't feel good. It didn't feel like a loving childhood. And I reflect on that a lot. I've done a lot of work on that. And when I think back on it, I try really hard not to focus on the negative. Right. But it outweighed the positive, right? And I don't want to shed, a bad light on my mother and my brother. They're not bad people. Right. Just bad situations. And so I remember as a kid, trying to be very innocent. I tried to go and hang out at churches, I think I was just really trying to find something to latch onto, but also feeling that emptiness because my family was not into that. Like, they didn't do that. My grandma kind of did, but she was like Mexican Catholic, right? Like we go to mass, which is, let's not talk about mass. And so I really tried to find whatever I could, right? And I think as I started to grow older, I'd see how, my family would party and they'd hang out. And if I'm being truly honest, I remember when we were in Minot and we lived in a house, and the only thing that blocked me and my brother's room, we had a wall, but then it was a little curtain. you know, and, you know, they're just pot smokers, you know, and so I'm this kid next door, and, you know, but it was always like, oh, you don't be into that. You don't be doing none of that, you know, and I think it's kind of silly, right? Growing up in that, it's like, I don't know what you're expecting.
Right.
But slowly but surely, you know, you try to identify with that. So I would like steal my mom's cigarettes, and me and the girl down the street would go smoke them under the bridge, and just thinking we're really cool. And, you know, as a child, you really have no idea what you're doing. In those instances, you're really just trying to like identify with something. And so, I slowly started smoking weed and then drinking and, just all those things. But, you know, I never really was like too aggressive into it. I definitely put myself in like super risky situations. But I really think that like back in that time too, in the 90s and early 2000s, it's like, you know, that was a time when you like your kids would go outside and like you didn't worry. You know what I mean? Like you let them run off, and it wasn't abnormal. And so, you know, I just kind of started doing things, but, you know, I'm not going to lie, I definitely grew up with a lot of abuse. So there was a lot of like fear there. Like I never wanted to screw up. I never wanted to get caught doing anything wrong. So I think maybe that fear kind of kept me in this like state of really not going as deep into it as I've seen some of the other peers that were at that same age range go into. And so, you know, I kind of messed around like that quite a bit. And then we ended up moving to Fargo, and my brother stayed behind. And that was at a time where I was in high school. It was like my 9th grade year. We moved to Fargo, and, you know, that's kind of like when the bond started kind of happening with my mom. You know, my mom didn't know anybody but 2 people. And we just she wanted to move to the big city. And so slowly but surely, you know, I'd had these friends that smoked pot, and then, you know, eventually she would need some pot, and then it would just kind of like happen like that, right? And so we started bonding like that. You know, and I was like that I was just this like shell of a kid for a very long time. In high school, I didn't have any desire to be there. I didn't have any goals. I had ADHD, right? Eventually I stopped being medicated for that pretty early on. Like I'd say even before 6th grade, it wasn't something that was like managed with my family, the appointments and the medicine and everything like that. And so eventually that kind of trickled out. And in high school, I just started getting these friends, you know, and doing all the things. And, again, you know, I really think about my past. It's like I wasn't as hardcore, but it wasn't until probably age 20 that I had started like slipping into like harder drugs. And I was just, you know, I was one of those people where I was like, oh my God, I would never do hard drugs. You would steal from your mother. I would never. And then I did. And so, you know, it was actually a very unsettling time for me. I think, you know, I ended up doing these hard drugs because I met a boy, and, you know, I thought, man, this is it. Like, I feel special. I feel this connection with this person, and nobody knows what's going on with me. And, you know, I don't really have a lot of friends. You know, when I was younger, you know, happy-go-lucky really just turned into a lot of anger for me. And, you know, I was a very, like when I would get upset, I would like rage. You know, so I didn't hold on to a lot of relationships. And I, you know, always was seeking out attention in some form. And so eventually, you know, getting into these harder drugs and meeting these, you know, very unhealthy and risky people, you know, I came very, very close to, you know, I mean, I'm just surprised, honestly, that I didn't go to jail more. I didn't fall into the system, and I really flew under the radar for a very long time. So I guess from that, the biggest thing is that I was really getting into a very, very, very toxic point in my life. believe it or not, when you first get into drugs, everything's thrilling, everything's fun, everything's great. You seem like you're really productive, and these people that are around you, maybe your friends, and this is great and everything like that. And then I ended up meeting somebody who was extremely toxic. I actually had a boyfriend who had overdosed and died. And so after that, this person that I was with, it just became this terrible entity in my life, and it's hard to like wind around it, right? To like not slip down that spiral of how bad it was. But I really started to come to this like, oh my gosh, I need to change. Like something's got to change. Like I can't believe I'm finding myself in the same place that, my mother found herself with my dad. And so, through that, I was like ready to let go. I'm like, I'm done. You're getting out of my house. Like I'm over it. And then I found out I was pregnant. Go figure. And, it was one of those times where I was like, man, I grew up in a single parent household. I really want this to work. And, toxic narcissist is going to tell you, oh, this is going to work. I'm here for it and everything like that. And then, of course, the progression of it just continued and continued and continued. And somehow or another, I ended up getting out of that. I ended up finally just getting the strength to cut those ties. I had gotten out of that apartment and I got in my own apartment. And, I had my daughter during COVID. And so, that was definitely a time. I should back up a little bit. So I kind of skipped over the point where I went to treatment. So there was a time where my brother was kind of going through some really rough stuff. And I was on my way to go see him and just be there for him. And I ended up getting arrested. And it's crazy because I had stopped using before that. And right before I went, this guy that I was with used and he, ticked me off. So I'm like, I'm going to use now. And I remember I had went on this trip and I had, just a little bit of stuff with me. And I was flying down this road by like Velva. And this highway patrol got me and took me to jail. And, I was 27 years old. I had never been caught for anything. And so like that terrified me, right? I was just like, I've never been caught. You're dampening my record. Like, sir. And so I fought it. I got a hold of, it's such a small county. They were like, you can just call the prosecutor and work something out. They're like, how am I going to go to court and all this stuff? I've never been through this before. And so I kind of struck up a deal, I guess. And he said, well, you need to go get a chemical eval. And then you need to complete whatever they recommend. And then from that, you can have this expunged off your record. And so I was like, yeah, let's go. And I went and I ended up going to one treatment center and I hated it. And I ended up going to another one. And I felt good there. Like I felt really good there. Like, some people, they're court ordered to go to treatment. And when I got there, I just, every time, I'd introduce myself or anything, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm court ordered to be here, but I want to be here. I'm like, I'm in it, and I did. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, the disease of addiction. I learned, why I think some of the ways that I think and like, just what that all looks like. And so that was a huge, pivotal time in my life as well. And so right after treatment, that toxic person who I didn't think was toxic and thought he was the best thing in the world, was using. And so eventually that came out and eventually that, started me using again. And it was a very, very, very difficult time. And so when I had ended up pregnant, I was like, I'm done. Like I'm never going to use meth again. I'm not going to be that person. I can't do that. But I still struggled with substance use. I still struggled with alcohol. And so, it was hard because, even just going to doctor visits, I wanted the best for my baby, but being honest is terrifying, you know? And so I was honest as I felt like I could be. Right. And I had my daughter and it was fine. You know, they did ended up calling CPS and everything like that. But by the time that had happened, you know, I realized like, man, I don't want to be screwed up when I have this baby. You know, like I don't want to try to take care of this little tiny newborn by myself and, you know, be messed up all the time. And so I really did the work on trying to do that. And so I would go to NA meetings. You know, treatment kind of got me in the door there, telling me that that's what I needed to do. And that's kind of how I found the rooms. And then from that, you know, I used, and then I had gotten pregnant. And so I obviously stopped going to the rooms and all those things. And then COVID hit, and I was really like down, like, you know, like everything shut down. You know, I don't see anybody. I don't even have any friends. I mean, even the people that I used with just weren't in my life because I just was not close with anybody. And so I kind of was like, oh, yeah, I used to do this thing where I would go to these places and there was like-minded people. And so I would go there, and I think for like 2 years straight, I went to these meetings and I didn't really talk to anybody, but I would like complain about how I don't have friends. And then I would leave right away. And eventually I think I kept going long enough where people were like, well, then why don't you just come hang out?
Right.
Well, then why don't you make a connection? And so that's a huge part of my life today. Fast forwarding from that, I worked at Concordia College and I was a custodian there. And I just remember like thinking, dude, I don't want to show up to career day like this. I mean, I did it for 10 years. It's a very important job. Don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't what I wanted. And it didn't feel sustainable long term. Right. So, you know, scrolling through Facebook, I saw this ad and it was talking about single moms going to college successfully. And so I was like, oh, okay, you know, like, and I remember getting a call and they're like, well, do you have housing? And do you need daycare and all this stuff? And I felt really iffy about it. I was like, this is weird, man. Like, why are you trying to help me? That's just odd. And I think I didn't pull the trigger for a long time. And then I ended up going and meeting with the director there, or the family services director there. And she just kind of like showed me the campus and told me what it was. And I started the process of getting enrolled for college and, you know, just like picked a career out of a hat. I don't even know. It's crazy that I'm in nursing because it's like super hard. But, which people would laugh at me when I say that because like when I went through school, I was like a straight A student, but it's hard. And so, you know, I started my journey through there and I just graduated here last December with my RN. I got my LPN and then I got my RN through while being there. And now I work at Sanford. And so, I don't know, that would seem like a very clumped up version of like, you know, all the things.
It makes sense though, because from where you started from the beginning to the end, I think we could sum it up and say that connections save your life.
So it's funny that you say that. I just went to this women's retreat, right? And, you know, I've been doing a lot of things with my life and working very, very hard. And really, truly, like, recovery got me where I'm at. Like, if I didn't have the rooms of NA, if I didn't have my support system, my recovery system, my program, I really wouldn't be here. Like, I just wouldn't. It's not possible. If I didn't practice those things today, I would lose everything that I've worked for. And so I said it in my speech, and it's something that I struggle with is like, you know, I really connected my connections to my worth. And that was what made me feel like I was like, you know, somebody. The more people that I knew, the more people that knew me, I should say, the better I felt about myself. And so when I get disconnected from my recovery, like I said, I just got this nursing career, now, and again, skipped over a part. I'm engaged right now, and we just moved in together in March, and we together have 3 kids. And so it's different, and it's just brand new. I mean, I should say brand new. We've been together for a while, but like managing a blended family, and now I'm not only a parent to this little girl, but now it's 2 boys, and like 3 of them, they all grow 8 heads every day. So it's just like a whole brand new experience. And so working, on building this nonprofit as well, I basically like work, and then during the week I've been doing meetings for this, and I've really like put my recovery on the sideline. And so when I went to this women's retreat, I walked in, and a bunch of people like, Tory, and I was so excited to be there. I mean, I could just be myself. I can like swear my face off, and I can, shake my butt, and I could just like be this person, this like core of who I am. And, in these types of things that I've built my life around, you can't really do all that. You know what I mean? You can, but I mean, time and a place, right?
Right.
And I started to get very emotional. I started to get very heavy, because, mental health is so real, and it's something that I really I talk about a lot, but I don't think I've been like practicing it a lot. Working on yourself, and, putting yourself first, and like doing the things that make sure that your mental health, your mind health, your emotional health is in check. And I felt disconnected from my connections, right? And so I've been really struggling with the separation of being enough without all that other stuff. And so, connections are absolutely important. I think the biggest thing about it is it's not necessarily the connection. That's like the pinnacle of human race, right? Like we need that. Without that, we can't survive. So I'm not negating that. However, support is probably the biggest thing, because I can have a connection with you, right? But you may not have the same connection with me. Right. And if I don't have my soul in check, that can really deteriorate me quick. Right. And so, I mean, that's something that has kind of been the theme right now. Like at the retreat, it was grow through what you go through. And I was like, that's so heavy.
It's good though, because you have other people of similar situation and like-minded people. It's not a surprise that you were able to take the face off. In work, you work at Sanford, you deal with, you're in the recovery and psychiatric part of Sanford, which is also very heavy. With not only are you dealing with your emotions, you're helping other people with their emotions, which, I think is very admirable that you took that role. But, having to have that strong sense of self to be able to deflect that is hard. So that it brings me to a question of, we in society we hear a lot about, there's quite a few people that can recover from addiction, which is amazing. But what people want to hear, or what anybody that has had an addiction want to hear, is what do you do on a daily basis to keep yourself, the anxiety and the things and the triggers and all the things that add up to why somebody would want to use again. What do you do to manage that? Again,
very interesting that you say that, because anybody that's been in either AA or NA, or I think any really recovery program, I don't want to speak for them all because I haven't been to every single one, is that, it depends, if you're working a 12-step program or whatever the case is. But typically, you're going to meetings, you're around, addicts or like-minded people. The typical thing is you get a sponsor. And that's kind of your person. That's the person you go to when you're struggling. That's the person that you'll work these 12 steps with. it's kind of your guide, right? You know, they say you go into the rooms and you find somebody where you want what they have. And so you work with this person, and almost like a mentor-ish type of deal. And so those kinds of things, you know, and reading the literature and stuff like that, because you would be blown away by reading these books that they've come out with. And you're like, I've done that. I've done that. Oh my God, that's exactly how I think. Oh my God, it's like it knows me.
Yeah.
And so those are the types of things that you do. And a lot of people who relapse stop doing those things. And so being in college and being, you know, now in the nursing field and trying to build this nonprofit, it's like taken all of my time. And I get hyper focused. Like I get very, well, this is what I prayed for. This is what I've gone for. These are the things that I've worked for in my life. So surely everything else can take a back seat. These are my goals. But yeah, that's why I think when I went to this retreat, you know, I was sitting there and I was going, wow, I'm really messed up. Like, I'm really not okay. Yeah. And it can happen so fast, and it can happen without you even realizing it. And, you know, sometimes it's like it's crushing pressure. You know, I recognize that I'm always working to be better. I'm always trying to be this better person. But also, you know, it's kind of like when I was a child, you know, I'm treating myself like a project that needs to be managed rather than a soul to be met. And I have a issue with just being, like just sitting and like being okay with where I'm at, you know? Like I can say all day, like I'm grateful for everything I have. I'm grateful for where I'm at. But to like practice that is kind of a struggle, you know? I look at like the speech that I did, and I look like at the progression of my life, right? And the things that I've overcome and the things that I'm doing today. And all that is amazing, right? And then I'm sitting here and I'm going, but I'm not okay.
Right.
Like I'm not okay because I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not, you know, doing the things. I used to be very, very against the idea of like depression and anxiety. And I think that that's very stigmatized. I think it's really unfair, the way that it's thought about. And so I was trying to seek out help. I was trying to say the things that I'm going through, because there are times where I just get like stuck in like, why am I not feeling good? Why am I not good? You know, because we want to do that, right? We want to look at our life and go, everything I have is great. Everything should be great, right? It should be. But I'm not okay.
You're trying to change the world for your children and for, you know, I think it's that classic like achieving syndrome. You feel like you're okay if you're achieving and you're like making the next step and you're going here and here. But then you don't take the time to sit and think like, oh yeah, I'm doing these things, so I'm fine. Like I'm good. Like look at me. Like I'm in recovery. Like people are praising me. I'm doing all this stuff. But that doesn't mean that you still don't have all the same feelings you did when you were an addict.
Right.
You know, that doesn't change just because you're not an addict anymore.
Yeah.
So working on, you know, the struggle of the feelings and like seeing like-minded people and being around that, I think that's like Tory, it's so admirable to say like you're still not okay. You know, like that's perfectly fine. That's life, right? Like we have stress, we have things that we're constantly doing, and when you take a step back and you're not doing at the retreat, it's a time to breathe and a time to like get all that toxicity out and to just, you know, feel all the things.
I will tell you, I found a unicorn the other day, and what I mean by that is we were talking about surviving trauma and how it's this ongoing battle almost every day. It is every day. Not almost, it is. It's every day.
Yeah.
And he goes, wow, that's really interesting podcast you guys were talking about. He goes, I don't have anything like that. I go, what's the craziest thing that ever happened? He goes, not a thing. Not a thing. And I'm like, you are truly a unicorn, sir.
He's lying.
Because
He's lying.
I have never come across someone who hasn't had something happen that has changed their life, good or bad. And, you know, I understand people live and die, and that can be traumatic. But this dude was just even keel. I'm like, wow.
He's an alien.
I don't know.
You're not from
And
here.
good on
Are
you.
you a person?
Yeah.
But I would challenge anyone to really, and if he really did reflect back, he could probably find something, not that he needs to. But,
Right. Right.
How
Come on.
deep dig into
Yeah.
your
I was just
psyche
gonna
if I
say,
get this out?
dig deep, man.
Pretty soon there's a
There's
book
something
being
there.
published.
Yeah. It's like, wait a minute.
But yes, you know what? If people don't understand this, my future daughter-in-law is a nurse, and that school is hard. That is hard stuff, and you have to be committed. And bless the nurses. I mean, nurses run the show. They really do, and they've saved so many lives, and they continue to do it. And I don't know. I was a cop. Cops and nurses get along real well, weirdly sometimes.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
But good on you for that, because focusing on a career like that, to me, just the synopsis of the first part of your life and where you're at now, you are truly the epitome of a caregiver for all. So my question on that is, do you ever find that there's a different level of responsibility now with your story and coming out boldly saying, hey, this is what happened to me, this is what worked for me? Do you have people that reach out to you?
Oh, yeah. People always want to know, like, what's the secret sauce, right? Like, what got you through, right?
I want to know too.
Well, and I think that's just what's interesting, right? Like,
I think you're just a strong person.
I was just gonna say, you know, God, it's like a make or break, right? Like, you have to make the decision. I remember, you know, in recovery too, like a big thing too is like, when you come in, you're like, oh, I'm doing it to get my kids back, or I'm doing it for this, or I'm doing it for that, or you know, my husband really needs me to be clean, whatever the case is, right? And I used to kind of scoff at that. I used to get like really like, oh my God, you gotta do it for yourself, you know? Because like when I went into recovery, I didn't have any of that. I didn't have no family that was like, you need to get clean. I didn't have no kids, nothing. It was just a pure sense of desperation, right? And so now when people come in, you know, I would like have this like, and I remember a friend, a very, very good friend of mine was sponsoring, and he was just like, I don't give a shit why they're here. If it's for your kids, fine. Whatever. Eventually it changes. Eventually it's got to be for you, because you're going to get your kids back. They are going to come back in your life. Whatever you're going for is going to happen eventually if you're in recovery. If you're working towards these things, it's going to happen in whatever form it manages to happen, right? But then that's funny, because that's kind of like when the real work begins, right? When you don't have these goals or these barriers or these things that you're hyper focused on, and you peel back all these layers, then it's just you, right? And so that is also kind of the thing, right? So I've been trying to identify like what it is that's going on with me, right? And of course, every clinician, man, was like, oh, you're depressed. Let's get you on some meds. And I was like, all right. You know, I can't, if what I'm doing is not working, then let's give it a shot, right? And so I did that, and I had the worst dreams I've ever had in my entire life. And I'm talking like traumatic dreams that messed me up for weeks. Things that were just like, oh, okay. And so I was like, I am not taking those. Right. And so I kind of lost where I was going with this, but you know, when I started to identify like going through all these things and whatever, I remember talking to my sponsor, and she goes, well, I think now is probably a good time for you to like get into therapy, right? I think now is a good time for you to like try to start, you know, digging in. And you're like, yes, you've been doing great things, but I think now is your body's telling you this is you to start working on yourself again. And it's tough, right? You know, like, again, you have this lifestyle. You have the house, you have the partner, you have the kids, you have all these things. Like, parenting is a huge thing for me. Growing up the way that I did, it's very, very hard not to regress into the ways that I was raised, right? So hard. I have a red-headed Gemini daughter, okay? I don't think you understand.
Feel her spark.
Oh my God. Just like, you know, of course I have this strong-willed, heavy-headed girl, right? Or I should say heavy-headed, but, you know, hard-headed. Excuse me. You know, and just, you know, I know every parent goes through that. Just like, oh my God, you're my mirror. But trying to teach her the values that I so desperately want to incorporate into her: respect, strength, independence, kindness, you know, that compassion, you know, being sensitive, but also don't let people walk all over you. You know what I mean? Like, be a friend, but don't be a doormat. And, you know, go through life knowing that you're enough. All those things. And then the fact that they're just a 5-year-old kid. And sometimes they're like, F off, you know? And you're just like, I'm sorry. You came out of whose body? And they're like, what?
All those things you said, I'm so surprised you're a nurse. I'm sorry. That's like every nurse. You've just described attributes. All these attributes. And that's why it's amazing to me.
Well, thank you.
I think every parent feels they're failing all the time.
Oh my gosh.
You know, like, you see yourself in your kid. You know, like, if you have a bad moment or a bad night, like even myself, where, you know, I had a bad day at work, I come home, I'm agitated, I'm overstimulated, and, you know, I'm, you know, probably have my voice louder than I need to be, and then the kid's just, you know, being himself, you know, just boisterous and loud and doing all the things that I have instilled in him to be independent and loud and like, speak his mind, just not to me.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, I'm so loud.
You just described my last Friday.
Yeah.
Because Dan over here with the boring name was the biggest ass on Friday. And my wife has been with me for 26 years now. And she understands. It took a long time. But she gave me a day. Let me sleep it off. And yeah, it's interesting you brought up dreams. Because I don't think people understand how a nightmare or a dream can affect you for months. It can. For me, it would replay in my head over and over. It'd affect me all day. I'd be tired every day. I know you would not really want to go to sleep, because if it's not the same dream, it's one equally as horrible.
Right.
And again, it just continues to affect you. There's some really cool treatments they've actually developed in Minneapolis for nightmares for veterans. And they say it's in the upper 90s effective percent-wise. Don't know the details on it. I think that's cool. I don't have nightmares. I don't remember any dreams. I don't remember what I did yesterday most days.
Let alone when I sleep, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I have one recurring one, and it's so screwed up. I've had it my whole life. And when it's like my weird stress dream, I wake up. It's probably why I love like zombies and horror movies so much. Like, probably why it's my favorite genre. But the fear of like disease and being alone, I think, is like one of my biggest fears, which is so odd. But like, I woke up in the morning in my dream, and like, I find out that like the apocalypse is here, and then somewhere in the dream I can't reach my family. Like, I can't get to them, and I'm like stuck in this position. And I'm like, first of all, like, I love horror and I love all of that, but I would be the first person to die in an apocalypse, because like, I have no skills outside of like modern conveniences.
You're running into the tool shed with all the chainsaws.
So I need friends that like know how to do shit. Like,
Oh my gosh.
it's like, I don't like.
That's
I could
a
tell
gadget.
you like how like I can beat the crap out of zombies. Like, I'm good at that. Like, I have a lot of pent up rage and anger, so I feel like I'm pretty good there. But as far as but yeah, this dream, and I wake up and I'm just a ball of sweat. Like, I'm just like sick. And most people that know me probably think like I'm super independent, like, you know, like I don't need anybody, I can do all these things. But like, deep down, that is like a really crazy fear. And sometimes I feel like when your anxiety peaks, that recurring dream of mine would always come back.
Yeah, I have very bad dreams about my kids. My daughter especially. You know, it's just it's that thing where it's like, you can only do what you can do. You know what I mean? And she's going to live her life. So, it's interesting, right? Like, my fiance's I shouldn't say into, he is Native American. And so he's very cultural. And we've really adopted that and really brought that into our lives. And so recently we had a naming ceremony, and my daughter's Indian name is hides herself in the rain. And when they told me that and they started to explain, they were like, she's going to go through some stuff in her life. And I was just a water gates. I was like, oh my God. Because I know that to be true. I should finish it. She'll find peace in the rain. And so I know that to be true, but it is an irrational fear of mine.
The fear of not having control.
Oh my God. Talk about control, man. We would be here all night.
Yep.
That is an issue. But working on it. But also, with it's just that, she's a little girl, right? And you can't live their life for them, right? But I think it's I think the biggest fear is it's not necessarily the choices that she might make for herself. It's the ones that she doesn't have the control to make, right? Like somebody like making that decision for her, taking something from her, or doing something to her, or something like that happening. And then again, it's just like one of those things. It's just like you could never possibly. And I know, like, I'm sure I'm not the only parent ever to think that,
Right.
But it's so much so that it haunts my dreams. And so, those, for whatever reason, those anxieties manifest. I think that, those are like the one things in the world, my children are the one things in the world that, like everything else, does it really matter, right? Like if they're not okay, what else matters, right? Like, I mean, not that I'm just living for them, but that's the most important thing to me ever. And so, that crippling fear happens from that. I get very, like I said, yeah, that's just like, what is my mind doing to me right now? I already have these fears. Why are you manifesting in my dreams? Ugh. And so, combating those things is just like, trying to go back to like what you were asking with the secret sauce, it's just like trying to have this sense of self that is, the best possible thing you could possibly ever do for your kids is just like be the best that you can be. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? To show them that they are capable and that they're okay, and that, and that I'll always be there for them, right? Like I'll always be that support for them. Because I won't lie, like when I was a child, I did not have that. I know that my kids feel loved and they feel supported. And, but like you said, it just never quite feels enough, right? And I don't know what could possibly ever tell me like, no, you're there's nothing that'll ever tell you that you're doing enough, right? It's just something that you have to accept about yourself. And, what's really, really interesting is I did this, I was on TikTok and I saw this picture of this girl like ugly crying. And it had this like, this title on it that said, I put this thing into Chat GPT. Tell you what, Chat GPT can be a therapist. It's a thing. Yeah. And it's a very, very long deal, but it's basically like, I want you to, I'm going to have you ask me 10 reflective questions, and I want your feedback, and I want you to, I gotta look it up because I always butcher it. It's like really in depth. It's like Chat GPT ask me questions, reflective questions about myself, and kind of like peel back these layers, identify 10 negative loops, 10 positive loops, and then talk to me as my higher self, et cetera, et cetera. It's a whole thing. If you want to find it on TikTok, just Chat GPT therapist. And so I did that. And, when you're talking to like a computer, it's like different. You know what I mean? You're like, you can just say like whatever you want. Because then you don't have this person going, well, you're just like, no, this is what's up. And And so I did that, and there were like one of the first things that I actually wrote it down in an email to myself because I was like, I need to reread this like all the time. Is that I'm a very critical person of myself. Like, you know, I have this issue with not being enough because I continue to like raise the bar, right? And so there was a line in there that said perfectionism disguised as self-improvement. And I was like, okay, ChatGPT, calm down. Right? And
settle down, ChatGPT.
yeah, sir. I wanted you to like, you know, no. And there were just a lot of other things in there, you know. But that is definitely a thing, right? Like, I think like I need to do this and I need to do it right, and it needs to be great, and it needs to like, you know, it's got to like impact people. It's got to make people cry. Like, I got to like, you know, I got to get my pats on the back. I got to make sure that I'm like, you know, like I need to know that I'm doing good. Right. And so through that, I really realized that like, that's so much more harmful than good. But it's a hard thing to accept when you're in the thick of it, right?
Yeah.
It is, but they're chapters. These are chapters. This isn't the whole story yet. And going back to saying, hey, you're talking about family. It's like, I didn't have that. But by God, you created it, didn't you? You 100% created it. And from the lessons learned, that's strength. That's courage. I mean, that by definition is strength and courage, because it can go the other way twice as fast. And to get back, the further that goes, some people don't.
Yeah.
And you did. And that's awesome. That to me is the other thing I wanted to say is 29 here in law enforcement. This is special to me, and I'll tell you why. And I don't know if you've ever had a cop tell you this, but oftentimes you come across many people with many different addictions, many mental illnesses, and we never get to see what happens. And it's rare that I get to sit across the table from someone and see this closure.
You didn't arrest me, did you? No.
It's
like a big reveal.
How do you spell your last name?
Yeah, right. What's your social security number?
No, it's always been important to me. Maybe I'm different than other people that have been doing it for so long. I was always genuinely interested. I'm like, I wonder what happened. I always wanted to know, because then we were on to the next thing, which could be something completely different. And then our paths would cross again at some point. Like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah. That's actually interesting that you say that. Like, I've definitely kept in with my treatment counselor. You know, there were like times where, you know, there was people that I thought back to, and I was like, yeah, I should call them. I should like let them know, hey, I'm not dead, you know, like, hey, I'm actually doing okay, you know. You know, just times in your life where, you know, somebody cared, but for whatever reason it wasn't the right time in your life, or whatever the case was, right? Like, everything happens the way it's supposed to happen.
Well, would you have even been the same person? Like, say for instance, by happenstance our paths would have crossed at some point. I wasn't the same person, you probably weren't either.
Right.
You talk about connection, there probably would have been minimal connection.
Exactly, absolutely,
The
yeah.
opposite, probably polar opposites, but
Yeah.
Now here we sit across the table discussing this, trying to help people. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And you spoke briefly on your nonprofit, so it's Empower Her, right?
Empower Her, yep.
Empower Her. Tell us a little bit about it.
So me and another Jeremiah program alumni mom, who we used to be neighbors, she used to live above me, and you know, when we were at Summit one year, we were at their competition called Spark Tank, where women who own businesses or have businesses or even a business idea go and pitch in a competition. And so if you make it so far, you know, obviously win or get an award or whatever. And I remember watching that. We both went a day early, and when we went a day early, we flew out to Baltimore. We were with staff, and we were the only other two moms, and you know, we just decided, hey, let's hang out for the weekend. Like, let's, you know, we always said we were gonna hang out, and then when you're single moms in college, it doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Like, they try, but it's like impossible. we ended up hanging out, and oh my gosh, it was like girl date to the max, man. I sat with this woman in Cheesecake Factory for 2.5 hours, just like talking about life, talking about experiences, talking about our passions, talking about our kids, our baby daddies. And I remember sitting in Spark Tank. We were sitting next to each other, and I remember just turning to her and being like, what can we do? Right? Because I'm in nursing, and she's in social services. She's a social worker.
Sure.
And, it was kind of one of those things like, you want to do something? Let's do something. Let's like figure something out. Let's like make a difference. And through the course of a year, it was kind of like a little bit here and there or whatever. But by the next year, I had really like pushed forward, and I said, no, we're going to do something. And so the mission statement is to, don't butcher it, Tory. End the stigma surrounding pregnant women and mothers with children who are struggling with addiction by offering a compassionate and supportive environment where they can rebuild their lives and thrive. And so essentially, I had this whole other idea, you guys. Like, I was just like, we should do a detox facility for pregnant moms. And she was like, okay. And
you want to take that on?
yeah, and I'm like, oh, that's a lot. But really it was like through conversation and just like research and kind of digging in, we came to this kind of this whole thing, right? It was really pregnant moms, right, that struggle with addiction. She sees that all the time. I don't want to butcher what she does, but she works for the Child Protection Services unit. Mm-hmm. And then again, it's like my history and everything like that. That was the focus. Through conversations with certain treatment centers, we found out or realized that women who have children can't be housed on the treatment facility grounds because, their children can't be housed there. And I just remember sitting in that meeting and going, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, that's wild. And so, I just think about the process of like, man, you finally like admit that you need help. You finally get to this point. And they're like, we can't help you. Not in the way you need anyway. And so I was really like hyper fixated on that. I was like, that needs to be a thing. Like that's it. That's the ticket. So essentially, in a roundabout way, we developed this whole idea where it almost wants to mimic the Jeremiah program model, right?
Sure.
We want to have, our end goal is to have housing facility where women can have their children and be housed, and also like a daycare entity of that. And then we also want to do like that case management, peer support piece of it, offering access to resources and, goal setting, all those kinds of things, right? The start of it, what we're working on right now is establishing support groups. So that's going to be kind of the pinnacle of like how it starts, right? So right now we're working on the curriculum for that and then getting that curriculum certified so that when women participate, they can kind of almost have something at the end of it to say, hey, I've completed this or whatever. Starting the support groups, and then once they get through that, that's kind of when they'll move into that piece of the peer support, the case management, the eventually that housing piece of it. And so me and her have been working on this for the last year and a half, and really made a lot of progress. We did go to Spark Tank with that business pitch, and we ended up winning that. So
I think it's amazing. Like, I'm looking at it from like a different perspective. Like, you're talking about how the moms are going there to get treatment, but what you're providing is treatment for the children that have seen their parents use and doing all the things where the other children together in that same situation can be each other's support, like you had when you went to the retreat. So
yeah,
you're providing that for the children and for the parents, and I think that's huge. We often forget that when addicts and users do go into treatment, like, oh, we want to spare the kids from seeing that. I'm like, do you realize the shit that those kids have probably already seen?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like, them seeing their parent go through treatment is a godsend to these children. Like, they're excited, that they're going to hopefully get their parent back.
I'm going to be honest with you, like, that's, sometimes that might not even be the case, right? Like, these kids are so used to that toxic environment that something that's different like that, so that's going to be a challenging piece to it. Like, I already know that, right? But that's, I mean, that's what I do. I pick the hardest things to do, and I'm like, let's go. But
you guys are investing in your fellow humans. I mean, if you can't invest in your fellow humans, what's there worth investing in?
Right.
And not only just, it's generational with children.
Exactly.
I mean, this is how, in my opinion, this is how you fix things.
Right.
You take the time, and I'm not just talking investment, I'm talking time, I'm talking emotion and heart. And that empathy as a nurse that you have, that this is amazing to me. I did do a little research on the nonprofit, and what a challenge. But from what I've heard today, I wouldn't want anyone else in charge of it. I clearly think you not only get it, you lived it. And
right.
I think that's important, because there is clarity right there. And there is a rock solid foundation. And sometimes these nonprofits pop up and they have great goals in mind, but they're really not set up appropriately, or people don't really quite understand. And it's okay to mimic another one, because that is a tried and true model, but there are pieces that are missing, and you can't cover all the bases. Yeah. This is an important base. This base right here, it'll help generations.
Right.
And I said that earlier, and that's impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, I and it all really like rounds back to this like mental health piece of it, right? Like, it really does, right? So, women who have struggled with addiction, and still manage to have their kids. I'm assuming, there's obviously going to be women who are working to get their kids back, or whatever that looks like, right? That parenting piece of it. I don't know how to do this, and a lot of that's where the gap is too with a lot of treatment centers. Unfortunately, they just can't do it all. They can't do everything. They have programs in place, but the funny part about like leaving treatment is you stop using drugs, and you start trying to rebuild who you are, right? You're trying to, but you always have all these goals, like, I gotta make sure, I meet my court expectations, or I, gotta make sure I don't lose my partner, whatever it is, right? All these hyper-fixated goals, and it feels really good. You stop using drugs, you kind of get this like, high from that, if you will. And then all the dust settles. You might graduate treatment. But then you're like, now I'm just like on my own. Oh, now I have these kids, and I've never parented them. I didn't do any of that. I don't know, what does that even look like, right? And so that is always like the biggest piece that I try to sell, if you will, right? It's not like, I love that you said that. I really love that you said like investing in humanity, because it's so true, right? People like, generalized. People just have this idea, just stop using drugs. I truly used to be that person. Like, I really did. I was like, oh my God, just stop. And sure, let's just say I could stop. But then what? Because I haven't been living. I haven't been doing anything. And so, trying to even offer parenting classes, trying to offer this like community support of moms and children, trying to even help with like mental health services, and making sure that that like it's gonna be okay, right? Like, whatever you can get through, you don't have to get through alone. And that's how even moms who don't use drugs, right? Like single moms who don't use drugs and they're just like parenting on their own, they're like, it sucks. You know what I mean? At times, right? Like, if we love our kids, we do anything for our kids, but like, there's just like there's no secret sauce.
You just provided a ton of clarity to me, because when I do public speaking about trauma and surviving personal trauma, I've said this before, but even in our podcast, little monologue that you can read prior to the podcast. It says, living your life back in the middle. And that middle isn't going backwards. It's rediscovering your identity. And prior to maybe use, or prior to the trauma, or prior to figuring things out, going back to the middle isn't going back. It's rediscovering your identity. And for me, personally, it will never be the same, but it has become better. But it was terrifying to tell myself, it's okay today, I'm going to go down the pontoon. I would never do that before. Absolutely not. I am going to go work on my guitar today. No way. There's other things I got to be doing. And it took a long, long time. And I always use the analogy of Christmas time, receiving Christmas gifts. It was torture for me. I loved watching the kids open Christmas presents. If someone handed one to me, I didn't know how to respond. I don't. Just don't. You know? And you become a downer.
You shouldn't have. No, seriously, you shouldn't have.
I kind of get that. There's a very, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a similarity there. It's like, here you are in treatment, and okay, now I've successfully completed this. This was hard. This is amazing. Now what? Now I have to rediscover myself. Who am I?
It's hard
Still
for
not
people
there.
to do, you know, like you had talked about that achieving syndrome.
Do you know anybody like that?
Oh, I don't know. My friends laughed at me because last night we went out for dinner and, you know, I was talking about, oh yeah, like this going on, I have this going on, and then I'm throwing this big Halloween bash and I'm doing this, and then she's like, so you're not busy? I'm like, no, it's been okay. You know, this is fine. This is normal. So prior, I was in therapy, and she, you know, she's like, oh yeah, you got everything figured out. She goes, so like your homework this week is to get a notebook and sit down and like write your thoughts out. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I had a day off. It's Monday. It's an afternoon. I was like, no, I'm just gonna sit and I'm gonna write this. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, just like you would on a computer screen, ... right? And I'm sitting, I'm like, okay, well, I'm like, well, I'm gonna go get some water. So I go grab some water and I sit down. I'm like, no, this isn't right. I don't have the right pen. So then I'm going, I gotta go find the pen. So now I'm in a drawer. So I had to rearrange the drawer. And after I got done with
You
the
have
drawer,
ADD too.
I do. I'm
Yay.
terrible. I'm diagnosed and I'm just living my life ADHD wonderful.
Abigail Dirk is fixated on her drawer.
I have
It's a real
terrible drawers,
thing.
so look it up. But so I sat down, and what I did is I wrote, I hate the color of my living room. So guess what I did? I went out to search for a new color for my living room. And so I had this like plan. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna paint my living room. And you'll notice like in my living room when you walk in, there's like black splash of paint. Like that was me trying to figure out the color. So I got to hyper fixate on that for like the remainder of the day. So like the overachieving thing, sometimes I feel like, you know, when you stop, you feel the emotions and like the dust settles. You're like, you focus on your worth with your achievements as opposed to just being and just like understanding that like if I didn't achieve shit for the rest of my life, the people around me would still love me for who I am.
100%. 100%.
And that's a hard thing to swallow.
Oh,
But
man.
it's also the truth.
Right.
And you know what they call that? They call that love.
Oh, Dan, yes, we all know.
No, you do.
They do, yeah, absolutely.
It's what it is, and that love to me was always a hard word to say, but it's always existed, and it's always stood the test of time. And if you can find it and live it, you're winning. I've learned some hard lessons about love. I got schooled by a Vietnam vet about love. Because he saw I was struggling, and he goes, you know why you did what you did? And I'm like, no, he goes, you did it for love. I'm like, not that simple. He goes, 100%. Love of humanity, love of your fellow human. I'm like, maybe it is that simple.
Yeah, simplicity. Yeah, and I mean that's another thing. You know, that's a commonality of addicts, right? We want to just overcomplicate. I mean, I don't know about humans. I'm not normal, so I don't know what that's like.
Define normal.
Yeah, well, you know, I think that's like a what do you call that? That's like a that's just an idea.
Unicorn.
Yeah, unicorn, right? Yeah, yeah. When especially like when us addicts or we're dating somebody that doesn't ever use or anything like that, or I shouldn't say they're not addicts. We're like, you're a normie. And I could never be with a normie, but you need to understand what's going on in here. But yeah, I mean, like that's like one thing that our literature says, and that I get told all the time. I think kind of overcomplicating. I think you just need to keep it simple and like, what does that even mean, right? And if I'm not trying to hear it, it is simple. It's fine. But it's I always say this too. Self-awareness is a blessing and a curse. It just is. For me, I am hyper aware of all those things, right? And so if you really wanted to get like in an in-depth conversation, I very much overanalyze, right? This is funny. I'll bring this to a point. So I had decided to go through like a psychiatrist appointment, right? And I'm talking about all these things, and I'm like, going forward with like, all the things that I like feel, and he'll ask me questions and I'll answer him and all these things. And, he was like, do you find yourself to be highly motivated? And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, do you see yourself as intense? I was like, oh my God. Just from 5 minutes, Joel? My God, but no, anyways, throughout the conversation, he was able to like really shed some light on things, right? Like, I am very much an overanalyzer, and I very like over explain myself, right? To like, I know this is not, this is like, this isn't the right idea, or like, I know this is irrational, but da 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 da. And that's, I think it's like a commonality, right? Of anybody who, is trying to grow through anything, right? It's like this idea that, if I can just explain myself to you in this like perfect way that you'll understand and you'll get exactly what I mean, then maybe it'll be okay. Like maybe I'll be able to just like, feel this, which never happens, right? Like, you're not me. You're never going to be in my head. You're never going to understand like exactly the feelings that I'm feeling and all that stuff. And so, trying to just be accepting of that, right? Like that it's never just going to be perfect, right? Like you're never going to land on this like perfectly level spot in the earth where you're like, this is right? Unless you allow yourself to, right? Like it doesn't have to be that way.
Last week we interviewed Mariah Prussia, and I missed a huge part during this interview. And when I edit these podcasts, I listen to it over and over and over and cut out all my coughs and burps and stuff like that.
Thank God, right?
Someone very close to me reached out and said, I really took something away from that. And knowing this person, and they know who they are, and I'm not going to call them out, said, I learned that there's no such thing as perfection. Mm-hmm. You can strive for it, but you'll never achieve it. You can get a perfect score on a test, but your handwriting could have been better. Or you could have typed fast. There's no such thing as it. And for a perfectionist, that's got to be hell. I don't know how you let go of that.
I don't know either. I think at some point you have to just tell yourself, like, you're enough. Mm. And that's a hard thing.
You gotta believe it, though, too.
In a world full of achievers and people trying to be famous on TikTok and the constant strive to be better and to be perfect and to have that hanging over your head, that's a lot on a person, a lot on your children. We strive to not make our children as screwed up as we are, and we do all these things, but we expect you need to do this so you don't end up here. Mm-hmm. Like that control factor. So how we navigate through the world. But as we wrap up here, Tory, I know this is going to be like a huge thing to put through your brain and a huge question. But if you know of anybody or could give advice to somebody who is currently struggling in any aspect of their addiction, whether it's the beginning, the middle, and there never really is an end, what do you think you could say?
That got me really choked up. Sorry.
Totally understand. Take your time.
There was a time when I was married that that we would use, and I remember the exact moment. I remember sitting in my apartment and all this chaos going on around me, and I remember thinking, how could I ever possibly stop? Like, the one person I care about, they're not going to stop, right? And I don't care enough about myself to stop. So how could I possibly stop? And I never, ever, ever knew anything about NA. Like, I never even knew that had existed, right? And, things always come into your life the way that they're supposed to come in. And it's a harsh reality, and I think people in addiction really, really struggle with this. You just don't have to do it alone. You just don't. And that part, that saved my life, the reminder of that all the time. Because when I entered those rooms, the love that was there, and it was awkward, and it was weird, and it was fascinating, and it was amazing. But it was also something that I really had to work at. But the reprieve, the fucking exhale that you get when you're there, that's the biggest high that you could ever achieve. And it's so difficult to accept as a recovering addict, and as a parent, and as a woman, and as, a human being, that some people will just never experience that. That you will live your life in so much pain. But, somebody said something to me the other day when I was, this weekend when I was going through it. And it was, when the pain is greater, how does it go? When the pain of staying the same is greater than, I'll have to look it up. When the pain of staying the same is greater than changing, that's when it happens. It's that desperation. And you don't have to get there. You don't have to be desperate.
And you don't have to be perfect.
Exactly.
I think that's the big key.
I have chills, actually. My little tattoos here, the smokes are there, and it's not because I'm cold. That hit.
You don't have to do it alone. I think that is the key takeaway from all of it. And you don't have to be perfect while doing it either. So, Tory, thank you for sharing your story with us. Extremely moving. I'm crying. Like, my eyes are like just seeing it come through you and how passionate you are. We really thank you for being here today.
Yes, thank you very much. And we'll talk to our world-class IT department, Abby. We'll try and get that link of your speech up there.
Yeah.
And, any information about the nonprofit that you guys are working. So
I would love that. Yeah.
And we want to make sure people know about that.
Yeah, I put my heart and soul in that speech. So it's definitely, I was hesitant for it to be up, but then I pulled that trigger. I said, why not? Why wouldn't it be something that people need to hear, right?
It is. It moved strangers. It moved us, right?
Right.
So,
exactly. And here we are.
Excellent connection.
Yes.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Kiss My Chaos podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we speak with some of the most intriguing people about their journey from trauma to triumph. If you find yourself in mental crisis, please seek professional medical help immediately.